From magazines and TV screens to our Twitter and Instagram feeds, celebrities are everywhere. So it's of little surprise that they influence our life choices. Joining us now to detail why that might be a problem is Timothy Caulfield. He's the author of Is Gwyneth Paltrow Wrong About Everything? When Celebrity Culture and Science Clash. He's also professor and research director at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Hello to you.
Hello.
Okay, for people who may not have heard of Gwyneth Paltrow, I think they've been living in a cave. She's an actress. She was married at one point to a very famous musician who's the lead singer of a band called Coldplay. Why are you picking on Gwyneth?
So I don't really pick on Gwyneth. I think that she's just such a great symbol of the place of celebrity culture in our lives today. In fact, I love celebrity culture, and I talk about a lot of other celebrities in the book. But Gwyneth is such a great example because not only does she talk about health things, not only does she tell us how we're supposed to live, but it's also part of her brand, right? She has this company called Goop where she sells items, and she uses that as a platform to give advice on a whole bunch of things, from detoxing to steaming your vagina to the kinds of supplements we're supposed to take. So I felt she was a really good example of celebrity culture. In addition to that, I thought she would be a good person to kind of try to track down and also to use some of the advice that she gave. So I don't hate Gwyneth. I just use her as a really good example.
She might talk about how to unhate her if you hated her. Okay, so you have followed some of Gwyneth's advice. One of the things that she and other celebrities have sort of flogged for a long time are these cleanses. You did a cleanse. Yeah. What happened to you?
Yeah, that's right. And cleansing, I love this as an example, cleansing and detoxing, because it really is everywhere. I mean, if you believe some of the industry data, it's over $5 billion industry. This is and it's growing and becoming more popular, and it's associated with things for like juicing and all these kinds of things you're supposed to do for your body to detoxify. And the reason I love the topic is you can be completely unequivocal about saying what the science actually says. The data says these things are completely useless, right?
Every single one of them.
You don't need to detoxify. Like when you pee, you're detoxifying, okay, right? You have organs in your body to detoxify. And more importantly, a lot of these trendy diets and detoxes, they never really explain how they're going to work. The idea of detoxing is sort of like the modern equivalent of evil spirits or something like that, that we have to rid our bodies of. And so there's really no evidence how it works. So I thought I'd go on Gwyneth's cleanse, and I went to Hollywood and I met with her doctor, Dr. Younger, who was very generous with his time, and explained to me exactly why I should be going on a cleanse and what it would do for me. So I tried it, and it was 21 days, very extreme.
Like what kinds of things?
So you eat just a powder in the morning, a powder drink in the morning, which looks like Nestle Quick. I don't know if you remember that from your childhood.
Yes, I do.
Does not taste like Nestle Quick, unfortunately. That's your breakfast. And then you can have real food for lunch, but not much, and it's very restricted what you're allowed to eat. And then another shake, another one of these Nestle Quick things for dinner, and it's supplements throughout. And it was, obviously very calorie restricted, so I lost a ton of weight. I lost like 9 pounds. And did it come back on? Of course, yeah, almost immediately, and I tried. And the whole idea behind it is that you're resetting your system. You're resetting the flora and the bacteria in your gut, which is often another reason people allegedly should do cleanses. It's supposed to just make you feel better. It's supposed to make you de-stressed, all these things, right? Did it do any of that for me? No.
You didn't feel better?
I did not feel better at all. In fact, I felt miserable during the cleanse. Now, having said that, there is some evidence and some anecdotal reports that people do feel better doing a cleanse, because you're starving yourself, right? And there's some data about how people get a little bit of a buzz when they're starving. And so I didn't feel better. But when you're done, there is this sense of accomplishment. Even though I knew going in it was probably bogus, right? I knew that it was probably not a lot to it. I still felt like it was an accomplishment. And I think that's another reason people do it, right? It's like the mountain has been summited. They've finished the marathon, right? I've finished my cleanse.
Sure, I starved myself for 21 days. There's some sense of accomplishment. I lost 9 pounds. That's all,
exactly
patting yourself on the back kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Can you help me understand this? I've never been on a cleanse or a detox. I actually don't even know what the difference is. Is there a difference?
So is there a difference between a cleanse and a detox? Yes and no. There's detoxing is associated with a whole bunch of things, from juicing to so this whole idea, or to taking certain kind of supplements or to eating certain kind of food. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a cleanse program. But cleansing and almost all cleanses claim that they also detox.
Okay, all right. They're all bunk, is what you're telling me.
They're all bunk, yeah.
There's not one that you come across that ain't bunk.
Look, almost every single trendy diet is bunk to some degree. I mean, we should just eat, we can talk about that, you should just eat a healthy, well-rounded diet. I mean, evidence tells us that again and again. And to be honest with you, nutrition research is really tough to do. And that's why you hear these stories about, you know, something's good for you, something's bad for you, coffee's good for you, coffee's bad for you, chocolate's good for you, because it's really hard to do this research well. So there's just a few kinds of diets, primarily the Mediterranean, that have any good clinical data to back them up. So I think most people should be skeptical of all diets, whether it's a cleanse or otherwise.
Okay, I want to bring up a photo of another celebrity, Katy Perry. Here she is on the cover of Vogue. You know, we all got used to Katy this year at the Super Bowl and all these award shows. Okay, this is a picture of her after she had finished a 3-month cleanse. So 90 days doing this cleanse. Is she, I'm not going to pick on Katy Perry, but are celebrities like Katy Perry being genuine when they say a cleanse makes them look like that, which is gorgeous?
Yeah. So she said, you know, I went on this cleanse because I really wanted to glow for the cover of Vogue magazine. You know, not that she was photoshopped or anything like that. It was just all the cleanse that was helping her glow. There's absolutely no evidence that a cleanse is going to do that, that it's going to alter your physical appearance, other than losing weight, because you lose weight in an extreme way. They're crash diets, and that's the way people should think of these things, right? So, but her endorsement, you know, she did talk about it a lot, for sure had an impact on the cleanse, the detox industry. Same with Gwyneth, right? These endorsements have a big impact. And I actually believe that, but for the endorsement by celebrities, I don't think that the cleanse industry, the detox industry, would be nearly as big as it is now. It may not even exist.
Right. Talk to me about how big it is. Like, what are we talking about when you say the cleanse industry, the detox industry?
Well, it's hard to get, you know, exact numbers, but, you know, billions of dollars is what people are talking about when you talk about this industry. But if you spin it out to include things like juicing, which again is often associated with detoxing, the consumption of certain supplements, again often associated with detoxing, this industry becomes even bigger. I mean, people are obsessed with supplementing right now, which is also bizarre kind of phenomenon. Again, and it's often associated with this idea that we need to rid our bodies of these toxins, these evil spirits. Right. And this simple solution will do it for you.
Right. I should make a correction. I said I'd never been on a cleanse and a detox. You made the point that I detox several times a day when I go to the bathroom.
That's right.
We've all been on many detoxes. Okay, I want to play a clip. This is from the movie This is the End. This is a movie with Seth Rogen and Jay Baruchel. They're talking about gluten, which we hear a lot about nowadays. Just for viewers, this is we have some choice language in this, so it's going to be bleeped out, but take a listen to this.
Look, man, if you stopped eating gluten, you'd feel way better all day. Whenever you feel that's because of gluten.
That's not true. Who the told you not to eat gluten?
It's just true.
You don't even know what gluten is.
What gluten is?
No, you have no idea
I
what
do know what gluten is. Gluten's a vague term. It's something that's used to categorize things that are bad. You know, calories, that's a gluten. Fat, that's a gluten.
Somebody just told you you probably shouldn't eat gluten. You're like, oh, I guess I shouldn't eat gluten.
Gluten means bad man, and I'm not eating it.
Okay, Timothy, let's talk about gluten, because now in almost every grocery store, there's like a dedicated aisle for gluten-free things. Seems to be sort of the it thing to be doing right now, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'm being told, because everyone talks about this now, that you should go gluten-free. What are the advantages of going gluten-free?
So this is a controversial topic, and you're right, people are passionate about this. This is, you know, a lot of people feel that it's changed their life going gluten-free, that, you know, all of their ills are associated with going gluten-free, and again, a massive, massive industry with a lot of marketing behind it. So I break down the gluten-free story this way. Is there any solid evidence that you need to go gluten-free for your health if you don't have an identified clinical problem like celiac disease, right, or some kind of specific sensitivity? do you need to go gluten-free for your health? The answer is no. There's no solid evidence to support that it's going to make you healthier. Now, the real reason most people go gluten-free, and there's a little bit of data to back this up, is for weight loss purposes. Is there any evidence that going gluten-free is a good weight loss strategy? Again, the answer is no. And in fact, there has been some studies on this. They're not great studies, but studies that show that going gluten-free is not a good weight loss strategy. In fact, a lot of gluten-free foods are high in fat. They're not exactly the healthiest options out there. So is it a good weight loss strategy? No. There's controversy around this idea of non-celiac gluten sensitivity that a lot of people claim they have a sensitivity to this. I think the evidence is still emerging on this, but it certainly is not 30–40% of the population, which, by the way, is currently trying to avoid wheat. It may be like 1 to 3%, if that much, that actually has this sensitivity that we still need to explore.
Right, because my friends, other people, myself, I said, when I eat bread, I feel really bloated. It makes me feel terrible. I should stop eating wheat. Wheat is the culprit.
Right.
You're saying, nah.
No, look, I do think we need more research on this because it has become such a huge phenomenon, but the evidence right now is not very strong that there's this idea that there's something evil about wheat. On the contrary, there is evidence that whole grains are very, very healthy for you, and the one diet that has good clinical data behind it, the Mediterranean diet, recommends, has as part of that whole grains. Yeah. So is there something magical about avoiding wheat? No. Is wheat in a proper and it's non-processed? Is it good for you? Whole grains good for you? Yes.
Okay. Here's the trouble that I have is that when I tune into a program like this or various others on my television or radio, I see some doctor who's highly respected, often not just the doctor, TV doctors, highly respected, who's written a book based on science and research and data that says you shouldn't eat wheat. So on the one hand, shouldn't eat whatever. On the one hand, I can see that obviously there's an industry around all this stuff, marketing, retail, all that stuff that promotes things like organic and gluten-free. On the other hand, we have these quote-unquote scientists. I shouldn't say quote-unquote because they have the letters behind their names that make them scientists. How do I balance that as a consumer?
Yeah, I think it's really, really tough, and I think that's one of the things I try to explore in this book and the work I do at the university. There is so much noise right now about health out there. It's incredible, and often it is contradictory. And there's fascinating research that suggests that when the general public gets these contradictory messages, they start to tune it out completely. So they don't even listen to the sensible advice. They just say, look, you guys can't even decide what I'm supposed to be eating. I'm not going to listen to anything. So I do think it is very, very, very difficult. But I always suggest look for a body of literature, right? Look for a body of evidence. And the body of evidence that we have right now about wheat, for example, suggests that it is not the evil that we have. Now, is that going to change in the future? I doubt it, but there may be emerging evidence about wheat. And that's the great thing about following science and following good science, is you can change your mind as the data emerges. But right now, the body of literature says, all these books, and you're thinking of books like, maybe I shouldn't use the titles.
I can't remember, recently heard,
is a really good example of it. It really isn't backed up by a body of evidence. Often what these books do, or these trends, is they pick one little smidgen of science, maybe it's an animal study or something like that, or a study, older study that from basic science, and they spin it out into this huge theory that doesn't really correspond with what the body of evidence says. And I think that's what's happening certainly with wheat.
It does seem to have these trends though, right? Like, I don't know, 10 years ago we weren't eating carbs, and now it's wheat and gluten-free. It seems like everyone sort of comes together in this zeitgeist of our times that says, right now this is bad for you. Like, it's not like one person, it's like a whole bunch of them together. Yeah,
you're so right. And I'm always fascinated, like, if you look through the history of diets and the history of these kind of health trends, they're always wrong. So I'm always amazed that people can't reflect on that. Like, name a time in human history when there was some kind of diet fad, that turned out, what, this is right, and we're still doing it. It just doesn't happen. These trends always go, and humans are incredibly resilient. They seem to be able to eat a whole bunch of different kinds of diets and thrive. I mean, look around the world, right? Gluten-free is very much a developed country kind of perspective, and even some of those, I think they build on a lot of these myths around food production, and I think it also has to do with a lack of trust with science, right? That's starting to break down a little bit, and so, who do we trust? Do we trust this voice? Do we trust that voice? So I think that is a lesson that we need, the universities need to think about, the governments need to think about. getting trust back in independent science. And so that's the other thing I often recommend to the public, is that they should look for independent sources of health information, a source that they really think they can trust.
Okay. So a lot of people do these cleanses, detoxes, diets, whatever, to lose weight, to look better. And I want to kind of switch gears just a bit, because I want to talk about anti-aging, which is also a big thing that we're all trying to do. I have no idea how old you are, but you went, you tried some anti-aging beauty products.
I did.
Did it work? Is this the magical, is this the
I'm
after
glowing,
you?
aren't I? I'm glowing. Right? So I did try a whole bunch of different products, and again, I dug into the research as much as I could. I interviewed experts all over the world. And anti-aging, again, massive industry, one that's growing as the population grows.
Right, as we age.
As we age. We want to avoid this whole thing from happening. So one of the things that I was absolutely astounded about when writing the book, this is one of the biggest surprises, because I like to think I'm good at digging up evidence. It's what I've been doing for decades. Is the complete lack of evidence to support so many of these anti-aging products, particularly the ones that come over the counter. I think people should assume they don't work, because that really is, what I found. There are certainly certain behaviors that we can do that help. We can talk about those, but all the gimmicks, whether you're talking about bird poo, which a lot of celebrities.
What'd you put on you?
So I went to a dermatologist, friend of mine, who I respect, and he's an academic dermatologist. And I said, look, if I was going to be a celebrity and I wanted to take care of my face, what would I use? So he gave me a whole. I can't remember all of them. I had a bedtime routine, and I had a morning routine.
A regimen,
regimen. Yeah, and I would put all. And it takes time. That's the other interesting thing. See, it's not only investment of money, it's an investment of time. And so I did that, and I had a before and after scan of my skin done, and I used different dermatologists, and so they did. The latter didn't know that I had done this for a whole year. And keep in mind, before this, I did nothing but cheap soap.
Right.
Nothing for my whole life.
Yeah.
So was there a difference? You can probably guess the answer, right? So it's astounding how little evidence there is to support this. But there are things that we can do.
Like?
Obvious, but worth stating again, don't smoke. My God, it's incredible how you have these celebrities who are endorsing all these anti-aging products and they smoke.
Right.
And it's like, are you kidding me? It's like, this is like one of the worst things you can do for your skin. Stay out of the sun. I'm bad about that. Stay out of the sun. Sunscreen. And the other one is sleep. There's actual evidence that sleep helps your appearance, helps your skin, and I think that evidence seems to be growing. And the other one, there's a little bit of data out of Canada, actually, that exercise helps your skin. And actually, it's preliminary data. It's not a huge study, but they did do biopsies, and they found that exercise can actually kind of reverse the process, make your skin younger. So there's good news out there, and probably nutrition is another.
Right, so we're always going back to the same old tried and true tropes, right?
Yeah.
Eat well,
Yeah.
stay out of the sun, don't smoke, and exercise. Good for all things. Okay. These anti-aging things often, like, they show us their fancy labs or whatever, and they're like, there's science behind this solution that I'm presenting. Is there any science behind this stuff?
So, this is also, excellent point, because I think you're absolutely right about that. They try to make it sound sciencey. They always use kind of sciencey terms.
Hard
like,
words that I can't pronounce,
rejuvenate and revitalize, and they have all this language that they always associated with their products. And I call it science exploitation. Another good example is they use like genetic terms and stem cells.
That's the thing. They always have these words that sound scientific to me. I really can't pronounce them.
I think what's happening there is they're trying to leverage the genuine science to make it seem like this is a scientific product. Or there is real science, so something that you can get clinically. You go to a prescription strength, and they use the same language associated with the prescription strength for the over-the-counter to suggest that the over-the-counter has the same impact as and it's not the case.
Okay, I want to play another clip. This is from a show. I actually watched this show. It's called The Swan. It was I know I should be embarrassed for saying that, but I did. This reality show happened about a decade ago, and so these women were given these extreme makeovers by doing things like cosmetic surgery, personal training, therapy, blah, blah. And then they competed in this pageant. It was called the Swan pageant. So this is a woman named Swan Marnie. This is her going through her transformation.
I am 35 years old. I feel like I'm at least 60. The way I feel, well, you can kind of tell by the way I look. I am just so tired and drained just from trying to keep up. And every day it just seems like I never get done with anything. I felt this way for the last 15 years. I would love to look sexy and glamorous, just to feel like I'm alive again.
When I look at her, the first thing I notice is tired, bags under the eyes. We need to do a mid-face lift. I want to do an upper lip lift and some fat transfer to bring some sensuality and sexiness to her mouth. Body-wise, breast augmentation, strategic liposuction, and get her ready for the pageant.
Here she is, the brand new Marnie Regevich.
Like Marnie looks better. I'm using that in quotes. She looks different. She's gone to these extreme lengths to get there. But how would you characterize this attempt at sort of self-improvement?
Well, this is a fascinating example. First of all, she looked pretty good to begin with.
Yeah, that's fair point. Fair point.
It's sad to me that she feels like she needs to improve. But these kinds of shows and this idea, cosmetic surgery is a really good example of how our culture, and women in particular, but increasingly men, are under constant pressure to improve. And I've talked to a lot of academics about this. And by improve, that means look better. Right? It's almost that there's this cultural imperative that we're always supposed to be trying to look better.
And where does that come from? Like, where does this impulse, because we're all trying to look better, look good, look the best. Where does that all sort of stem from?
There's, I think, complex, obviously, very, very complex. But you know what? The sad truth is that good-looking people, attractive people, do have advantages in our society. There is a strong beauty bias. Whether you're talking about how you rate a professor, about your income, there's a beauty premium how people make, how you view people's morality, all of et cetera, et cetera. So there are advantages in our society to being attractive, and that is for sure has an evolutionary basis to it, right? But the good news is it's not super strong. You can, you can overcome it, and of course, the more you learn about someone, the more attractive they become. There was an interesting study about that very recently, actually. So there is that evolutionary bias and this desire to be attractive, but of course, a massive cultural element to it. And I think celebrity culture plays to this, right? This idea that it's all about beauty, not about health. When you're talking about dieting and cleanses and stuff, there's always an undercurrent of look good for a particular reason. It's a short-term goal, and you're supposed to look good. You're not supposed to worry so much about your health. You're supposed to really focus on your beauty. And I think these kind of shows really emphasize this. And cosmetic surgery, a drastic step, right? That you're having someone cut into your body and do something relatively permanent. So a really good example of the impact.
Okay, but a lot of people are sitting there going, why the heck is the agenda talking about this crap, basically? Yeah. I don't watch celebrities. I don't care what they say. They don't influence me in my decisions that I make. You make the argument that it does.
Yeah, I think it absolutely does. And I hear this, as you can imagine, after writing the book, I hear this all the time. Oh, entertaining stuff, but they don't influence me. On the contrary, there's fascinating studies that show that celebrity culture has an impact on all of us. There is even suggestions that we're evolutionarily predisposed. Now, this is speculation. It's hard to study this, right? But evolutionarily predisposed to follow celebrities. We've been hardwired to look up to people with prestige because that was an evolutionary advantage. Maybe learn quickly from them, right? Hunting skills or whatever. And that we have remnants of that with us still. Lots of evolutionary biologists have suggested that we love gossip, we love knowing about other people. We're wired to do that, and that's one of the reasons we have communities. So that remnants with us. And there's also this phenomenon that's called social comparison, that we are predisposed to compare ourselves to others. And if you think for most of human history, we compared ourselves to people in our village. When we saw a human being, an image of a human being, they were real, right? Or a crude drawing. Fast forward to now, our social comparators are celebrities, right? They're celebrities. Right. And we're bombarded by those images. And we can't help but have those images influence how we think about ourselves and think about others. And there's lots of evidence, research that suggests that's true. So even if you don't think celebrity culture is having an impact on you and your life, it is.
Okay. We'll talk more about celebrity culture and the impact it's having on all of us tomorrow. But I have to end with this. If the Gwyneths and the Katy Perrys and the Kardashians and if the stuff that they say they're doing isn't working for them, how the heck do they look so good? I mean, the reality, they look good, right?
Yeah.
And so what's the magic?
So, you know, the one thing I want to point out, in the, as you know from the book, I don't really pick on them because I love celebrity culture, and I actually think that they are, I don't know if victims is the right term, but they're also victims of this whole process that we've been talking about today, right? Because they're under incredible pressure themselves to look good. So why do they look good? First of all, they're genetically predisposed. Let's be honest.
They're good-looking humans.
They're genetic freaks. They're good-looking human beings. In addition to that, they have perfect lighting. They have perfect makeup. They are always on, and this is something I heard again and again when I was researching the book. And so it's the worst comparison imaginable, because they're genetic freaks that have everything lined up for them to look good, and we're comparing ourselves to that person instead of the person on the street. It's really a shame.
Okay, so don't compare myself to them anymore. I will stop that. Thank you. We'll talk more tomorrow night.
Oh, thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.